Good morning and welcome to Wednesday's webinar, where today, this is data correction month. We're going to take you through feed calculation. Philippa will be there to answer any questions. So if you'd like to type the questions in, she will then respond. As ever, if you've got any questions after, just please call the help desk. Feed calculation is something that we will have set up for you already. It's really important that if you're not sure that you call the help desk. The purpose of today's session was just really to do a refresher to show you where to go to look for the early phase of feeding, how to adjust the M+ table, and also how to adjust the mins and maxes within the calculation per group, and also how you can put individual animals onto either a bonus or individual feed. So that's the purpose. Please ask questions as we go along, and as ever, there will be a short movie coming out and a very short survey at the end. So where do we go? We go to the cow's head, we go to feeding, and we go to feeding setup. As I said at the start, this should have been set up for you already. It's not something that we want you to go through and do yourself. It's really important that you call us and we can help you set it up. So the purpose of this movie today is really just to show you where to go if you like to tweak it. So first of all, before I look at the M+, I just want to take you here to the increase-decrease. And the idea of this is you can have 3 different phases after the cow's calved. For those of you with out of parlour feeders, you can also do it before calving, but I'm going to assume this is going to be feeding after calving. And what it means is that all the cows can be fed on a kind of predetermined strategy at a set level over a given period before we then automatically switch the M+ feeding on. So what we have here is we have the period. So I've just set 2 phases in here. So from the first calvers, for the first 7 days, automatically, they will go from 3 kilos to 4 kilos. So when you put in the fact that the cow's calved, it will then automatically start the feed calculation for the first calvers, starting at 3, gradually stepping up over the first week to 4. Then you can see for the next 2 weeks, we keep it level. There is the option of the 3rd phase, but I'll come back to that in a second. And then we have this decrease phase. And the idea of this is we can set a predetermined amount of days where the concentrate will actually fall before the expected drying off date. So these periods are really important. The periods are the same for the first calvers, second calvers, and the cows, so that makes it nice and simple. You put in the amount of feed here, and it's really important that you graph it. If you graph it, you won't make a mistake. You can see it quite clearly. So when you put figures into the grid, please go across to the graph. So the first calvers here, we see 3 step up to 4. They stay level then to day 22 or 21. On day 22, we then start feeding based on milk yield. Second calvers we treated slightly different. They go up to 5. And as you can see, the older cows, they go from 4 to 6 to 8. But you can change all these figures. This is completely up to you. So if you say, no, I think that 8 kilos is pushing them too hard. If I scroll down to here, we'll change it here. So they're going to go from 4 to 6 to 7. I'll keep that on 7 here, and now you'll see that's now changed. This is the decrease phase, and what this means, I've set this for 14 days before expected drying off, and I've said that whatever level they're at, it will drop from day 14 before dry off to day 7, and then we'll automatically reduce it so that they're on nothing before the expected dry off date. So this is so that, you know, if a heifer's really milking well, you're not still feeding her concentrate sort of 3 or 4 days before she's due to be dried off. That's the logic. And again, you can extend that period. So if we go back to the grid, I'll just increase it a little bit. So I'll change it to 14 days. You'll see now the influence that has. So now 3 weeks before we start dropping it. Some people, they want to increase the length. They say, no, day 22 to start feeding is too soon. We want the cows to get over calving. So what you can do, as I said, is you can create this 3rd phase. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in another, let's say, 2 weeks. And you'll now see what influence that has. So we have a first phase here, 7 days, a second phase, and now a 3rd phase. And you can see now I've increased this increase period so that day 36, they'll then start being fed based on milk yield. Hopefully that's not too complicated. So really you've just got first calvers, second calvers, and cows, the amount of feed you want to put in, and then the periods you're actually going to set. So that's the first bit. We'll say okay to that, I'm happy. As you notice, before I said okay, I graphed it just to check it. So now the outside ration. Now this is a really, really simple one. We've basically just got one N+ outside ration, and we have two management groups of cows, which they've broken down into high yielders and low yielders. Obviously, if you feed different rations for different groups, then you'll create different N+ systems. But for the purpose of today, I'm just keeping it super simple. So if we go into edit, all these settings here are really important, but we'll have set that up for you. Okay, so what does this all mean? What we're saying here is that the outside ration is good for maintenance plus 12 kilos of milk for the first calvers. For the second calvers, it's good for 15, and we've kept the cows at 15 as well. Sometimes a little bit of confusion with the figures in brackets. All this means is I'm saying for the next 10, so above 12 for first calvers, for the next 10, so that's from 12 to 22, my feed rate is 0.4. And then for the next 10, my feed rate again is 0.4. So it just gives you flexibility here that you can have maybe a feed rate of 0.45 for the first 10 and then 0.5 or whatever, however you want to do it, however your nutritionist wants to do it. But we can set different feed rates. That's the reason for that. Again, whenever you change it, please graph it. So I'm just going to change this a little bit. So the cows are going to be able to eat more. So I'm increasing that to 16. And again, always graph it because you can see clearly then if you've made a mistake. So the most that we're feeding for, based on this N+ table, is 8 kilos. Why? Because we said 10 at 0.4, which is 4 kilos, and the next 10. So basically, this N+ table for these cows is good for 8 kilos. So graph, yes, I'm happy, finish. Then we go over to calculated feed. So as I said, we have two groups set up here. We have the high yielders and the low yielders, and this person has it slightly different. So I always calculate per group, and I'll show you the reason for that. Rather than calculate all, I always go in and calculate per group. And the reason I do that is it means that then each group can have a slightly different minimum and maximum. So here we're saying that the fresh calvers, they're going to go into that increase phase for the first 35 days, and then automatically on day 36, they start being fed based on milk yield. But here what they're doing is they're saying everything gets a minimum, and here we've got the maximums. So again, a minimum of 2 for the first calvers, maximum of 6 for the heifers. Then what we put in, and this is really important, the most the concentrate can fall by each day, and the most it can go up by each day. So this really is a safety net. So we have that initial increase phase. So for the first 35 days, feeding's predetermined. Let's say that the cow is on 7 kilos on day 35, but she had a bad calving or whatever. We don't want the concentrate to go from 7 kilos on day 35 to 4 kilos on day 36, which is her production level. So what we do is we say the most it can fall per day is 0.2. Now you can have that at 0.5, 0.2, 0.1, but I think that's up to your experience and that's up to your nutritionist how they want it. So we're saying this is the most it can change each day. And obviously 99% of you will be feeding with milk meters. And we take a 7-day average on that. That's really, really important. So we have a stable figure. And again, I'm saying here, the most the concentrate can go up by is 1 kilo. So if I just go to next and then go to finish. Okay, so here we have the logic. So this cow, 332, 70, yeah, she's been in milk 116 days, inseminated 70. Based on the N+ ration that we've got set up, it wants to feed 8 kilos, but it's feeding 7. So if you're not quite sure why, and you think, well, that's ridiculous, why is it not actually feeding 8? There, just put the cursor over the top of it. And we set it up, we said, no, the most that you can feed in the parlor is 7 kilos, but it wants to feed 8. So I'm just going to cancel that, and I'm going to make a change on it, because we're going to say that, yes, the cows can get up to 8 kilos. So again, I go back into here, I go to calculate, and all I need to do now is just adjust that one. So I'm going to say, okay, yeah, they can eat 4 kilos per milking. So I go across, back in again, finish. Okay, so now you can see it's okay. And because I had that set that it could go up by more than 1 kilo at a time per day, that's why it's gone from 7 to 8. So now the logic is it wants to feed 8 kilos based on the milk production, and yes, it's happy to feed 8 kilos. If I then sort based on days in milk, If we just go back up to here, right to the top, you'll see this cow here, it's only feeding 5 kilos. So it wants to feed 8 based on the milk production, but it's feeding 5. Why is that? That's because she's in that third increase phase. And that's how we set it. We said that's what she's going to get. And so she's gone, basically, she's on day 34, and we said for the first 35 days, that is an increase phase, and we ignore the production level. So what will happen then is tomorrow when we run the calculation, it will then go up by 1 kilo. So she'll go from 5 kilos to 6 kilos because the advice is sitting there at 8. So if you're not quite sure of things, always sort by comment. That's important. And what I then wanted to show you was, okay, what happens if we want to make a change? So if we have an animal that we say, yeah, we just want to change the feed rate slightly, what we can do is if we go into here, if I double click on the cow, I can then go to the cow record, and I have a number of options. So feeding tabs there, feeding is based on feed calculation. So if I go into edit, I can keep her on a feed calculation, that's fine. But what I can also do then is I can put a bonus in. So I say, regardless of what she wants to feed, let's say she's on 4 kilos, she's going to get a bonus of 2. So that's one option. I can always give the cow a bonus on top of the feed calculation. But if we go maybe the other way, this cow here, let's say that she's basically slightly cake sick or whatever, we actually want to reduce the concentrate. You see there, I tick individual allocation. If I go to feed amounts, now I can change it and say that she's going to get 4 kilos of concentrate. That's basically, she can only eat 2 in the morning and 2 at night. So we've adjusted that now. The advice is 8, but she's on 4 kilos. So that's fine. It'll then say, right, I want to recalculate the ration. So that's okay, we can do that. So we go back to here and go to next, go to finish. Okay. And if you're looking for the cow, you'll see here she is, it says DEV, and that means she's on an individual allocation. So based on production level, she's good for 8 kilos, but we're only going to feed 4 because we've got her on a fixed individual allocation. So when you're not quite sure, always pop the cursor over the top of it, then you'll be able to see it. Be careful, please, when you're putting cows on individual calculations, because it is possible, and I've seen it where people, they stick it on and then they forget about it. So I think once a week you should be checking this report anyway. And as I said, if you source on comment, you'll be able to see very quickly the cows that you have got on individual calculations, so then you can take them off. And if we just close that, I can say at this point, save the settings, and that's it done. So then when it links with the milking pilot, it will then send across the 4 kilos of concentrate. And the other thing I just wanted to make you aware of, so this person, they have a minimum of 2 kilos for the high yielders. So regardless of their production level, they all get 2. When they then move to the lows, so now I'm going to calculate it again, they're still being fed on the same N+ outside ration. So it's basically both groups have access to the same feed outside, but you'll see here, they've taken away the minimums. So they're only going to be fed purely based on production. So that's that's a kind of quick overview on the feeding side. If you want to go and check it and just check the feed, what you can do is go to here, feeding, go to calculated feed. Okay, last stage calculation. So if maybe let's say you're a little bit worried and you don't want to kind of go into it in case you make a mess of it. If you go to here, last stage calculation, then you can see quite clearly we have 87 cows in the high yielders. FPCM stands for fat and protein corrected milk. If you have milk meters, this must be set on a 7-day average. That's really, really important. So please, don't make any changes on that. If you're not sure, please phone the help desk and we'll double check it. It wants to feed 671 kilos. It's feeding 538. So again, why? Why is it doing that? Because some of these cows, as you can see here, they are on a decrease phase. So the concentrate is actually coming down because they're getting very close to being dried off. So their production level is still good, but we're reducing the cake because they're in a decrease phase. So that's the reason there's a difference between the advice based on production level and what we're actually feeding. And if you want to go and check another group, then again, top right-hand side, just go across, and then you'll see now the summary for the cows in the low yielders. So 37 in there, average production nearly 25, wants to feed 170, actually feeding 126, again, because we've got cows that are in the decrease phase because they're approaching drying off. So that is a fairly quick overview. I think what I must stress is it's really important that if you're not sure, you must phone the help desk. The purpose of today was not to show you how to set it up, because that needs to be a one-to-one training. It's more, how can I go through and fine tune it? How can I change the production levels? How can I change the M+ table? So I hope that you found that helpful. Philippa, what are we covering next week?
Next week it's CTS reconciliation and how to edit the data.
Okay, perfect. Have we got any questions?
No, not at the moment, no.
Okay, well that's a good sign. I'm always worried when I do feeding because I really don't want to confuse you with it. And as I say, I must stress, please give us a call, because that's when we can log in and we can check it. But hopefully that's given you an overview of how you can make changes to the M+, how you can adjust the length of the increase phase, and also obviously the levels of concentrate that you're feeding. So any questions, please give us a call. We'll repeat the session this afternoon, and Philippa will cover the one next week. So thank you very much for your time.